Got it. No problem. And again, I'll send this out so you can go and read that other stuff. But what I'm getting at, especially with something from David White, is this interesting sort of mandate, right? This call, diversify your data, diversify your interpretation, right? A lot of times we can talk about what it means to standardize your materials in order to sort of hone in on a particular data set of which to speak to that. That way it doesn't go all over the place. But even if you are trying to be pinpointing in what type of information you would like to focus on, there's still ways in which you can diversify your interpretation of it or methodological approach, things like that. And so in addition to being, transparent in what is your data selection, try and work really hard to diversify said content. And so, for instance,
real quick, William.
Yeah.
So do you just mind elaborating a bit on what do you mean by diversify your interpretation?
Yes. I'm going to
hold on. Let me make one statement real quick. The point about David's class, Worship Without Devotion, is a subversive class. And what he was really trying to do is to push away from our understanding of Hinduism through the guise of modern Hinduism, neo-Hinduism, and sort of classical Indology that only focuses on, say, the Puranic great texts.
Hold on, I actually have a question here that I can send in the chat for all of you to remember as well. Every now and then not every now and then, it's actually quite a bit, but well, it's only every now and then now that David White has retired. But I meet these students and it becomes a question of whether or not they want to work with Barbara or whether or not they want to work with David White. Barbara being Barbara Holdridge, in case any of you don't know that she's at UCSB. But there's especially something like Worship Without Devotion, right, is quite fascinating in this line of questioning of what to do with a tradition like Bhakti. And a lot of what White is doing is railing against the machine of it. And so here, I'll send that in the chat. This is kind of like a thesis of what is David White doing with his class. Do Bhakti traditions emerge or develop in South Asia as a restrictive, discriminatory practice institutionalized through hegemonies of transcendental, universal, pan-Indian superiority, thereby marginalizing fringe antinomian practices like tantric sex rituals, local iconography, other vernacular forms of worship, and non-Hindu religious traditions, despite observable qualitative intersections of the culture, right? And so the whole title of Worship Without Devotion, is there a there? Is there a religious practice outside of this hegemonic Bhakti way of thinking? And if you're on the Barbara Holdridge camp, you don't find it that institutionalized and hegemonic. If you're on the David White side of things, then that's a different approach. And so this is part of it, of what it means to diversify the interpretation. So I'm happy that you brought that question up, Kendall, so thank you. But in short, there's ways in which I don't want either students or readers or myself to grow too comfortable with an application of a theory, of an idea, of an observation. And I'll give an example. One of the things I'm working on right now, or that's soon to come out, hopefully, I study possession both in practice and in media. And overwhelmingly, of the things that you'll watch, the recipient of the exorcism, that who is which possessed, the demoniac, is going to be a young woman, right? And so I have an entire article that's going to come out that's on the possession of men. What does possession look like, right, when it is no longer those young women that are typically and overwhelmingly in that positionality, right? Is it subverting those conventions? Is it actually demonstrating it, right? Is it the exception to the rule, or is it exception that proves the rule, etc., right? And so that's me diversifying the data to try and diversify the interpretation of what is happening, right, in this thing that I study of something like possession. And I'll get to more examples of that. But hold on, let's see. Go back to sharing this. And so, for instance, last quarter, I taught a class on video games and religion, right? And hopefully you'll see a lot of David White in this crazy schema where, because it was like I was trying to mimic the theme of a video game and its construction involving like experience points. And so rather than mandating that they do certain assignments, they had to figure out different methodologies and ways of studying games, right? And so they could do single player or cooperative campaigns. They could self-initiate research or do crowdsourcing stuff online. They could do theory-based. They could do creative game design. So actually pitch me games that they want to make, play games and write about that, data science analysis, ethnographic data collection, research on material culture, discourse analysis. There's so many ways in which you could engage games, right? And I left that up to them on which ones they wanted to pick and choose. We'll come back to that. And so one of my favorite things, to do, or to, especially to either read or to write, I'll give you a few examples of them. This comes from a book on music and levels of narration in film. One of the chapters, because of my horror, proclivities, is on what is the use of sound in use of sound and music in horror films, right? And so I'm reading, and then I get to these questions, right? What kinds of music are used in which kinds of horror films? What do they bring to these films? How do musical means articulate the monster, characters, emotions of horrifying spaces? How do musical means affect the audience? How is music integrated with other soundtrack elements, particularly noises? And then the author gives you a breakdown of the type of sounds and music that you'll find in horror. So implements of new music toolbox, dissonances, atonality clusters, noise as music, soundscapes, right? Electronical sounds, right? Some of you can probably think of like a really high pitch, screech, right? Like a jump scare. Sensory extremes, high, low, loud, quiet music sounds, right? The music of innocence or sacredness, like children's voices, lullabies, organs, choirs, right? Signifiers of innocence corrupted or sacredness defiled or perverted, especially since the 1970s, the use of pop and music or pop and rock, especially usually in particular subgenres. And so pause, and I'll ask you to participate. Why do you think I love coming to something like this when I'm reading? Or if I'm writing, I strive to make something like this. Anyone? Why would this be beneficial? Why would this be helpful? Or a contribution if you're the one that wrote it? Oh, okay. Well then,
I'll give him a second. When teaching, it's always silence is good. It means they're thinking.
it could also mean they don't care.
I
Well,
sincerely doubt that.
to kind of like categorize things of how people experience music in horror films, kind of.
And use music, right? But what does
Yeah.
that help for you as a reader to have this stuff? Yeah, it is categorized, right? It's creating this interesting topology, right? It's creating this different, I guess it's like a morphology, right? How is it morphing? How is it manifesting, right? Music and sound in horror, it manifests in distinct ways like this, right?
Like the why of why these sounds create that in our
Even if sure, that can be the next step of the why, right? That's a little hinted at with like the jarring sounds, right? Or some sort of dissonance or the corruption of innocent symbols, right? So there is why kind of packed into a lot of these, but either way, it's providing a nice groundwork for whoever's researching this topic to then use it going forward. Peter, you were going to say something, and thank you, Cleo.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like maybe it's just really trying to get to the core of like what makes something horror or how it belongs to that genre. Something that maybe a lot of people don't even think about too strongly about how the sound effects and the music actually helps to create that mood.
Absolutely, right? And so there's another article that I use a lot because I really enjoy. Every time anyone asks me what's the best exorcism movie, that's not The Exorcist, I tell them it's a movie no one's ever heard of. That's a Polish film from 2015 called Demon that I do recommend. And this author, she's employing a lot of Gothic tropes of positioning this particular film, right, as a work of Gothic horror, right? And so, hold on, let me put there. What is the Gothic for any of you that don't know of like Gothic sensibilities, right? Here, she understands it as not as a separate genre, but an artistic mode and aesthetic sensibility, preoccupied with the repetition and revival of the past, upheavals triggered by past familial secrets, property, improprietary, inheritance, the exploration of the fantastic via the uncanny and the abject. So just pause. A sentence like that is fascinating to me. One, it's creating this topology, right, of consistent themes that are found throughout Gothic horror and Gothic horror sensibilities. But this author is also tying you to a fun bibliography, right? You can then go and read these sources of people that have written on those particular topics. Does that make sense?
I mean, you're really getting into the problem of definition.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that that's not all of what you're getting at, but often in religious studies, J.Z. Smith has said we're always defining things. And one of the things I work at as an editor when I'm working with people, with students or authors, is I'm constantly saying, define your terms. So here they're defining the terms, giving categories. And I think one of the other things that's exciting about these sentences or these three schemata that William has shown us is they're also reproducible. It's like a scientific apparatus you can use to go at the whole thing from a whole other angle because you have the apparatus right there in all those categories.
Absolutely. And so for anyone, obviously you don't have to study horror, you don't have to study Gothic fiction or whatever, but for anyone interested in this, right, this is a fun groundwork to what other people are writing, what the field is approaching, right, with either problems of definition or what to do with this problem of boundary making, right? And so for me, I love reading things like this. Mm-hmm. And I also really try hard to write things like this. Does that make sense? And this is funny because this isn't necessarily an argument. It'll tie to arguments, right? Mm. But this is a fun and interesting contribution, right, of scholarship that is really fascinating to come across.
So it's a combination category and literature review.
Yeah. There was another voice.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask, like what you would call it.
So I know that he's asking you to do like annotated bibliographies, which are really fun, right? And sort of a literature review as well but to me, it's kind of an interesting sort of positioning of the field, right? Of contextualizing, right? It's something like this is contextualizing so much, right? Hold on, where is the other one? Of music, right? Of music and sound and horror. It's contextualizing. It's contextualizing the topology, the categorizing, the definitions, right? It's giving you examples of the nursery rhyme being creepy in Nightmare on Elm Street, or the lullabies in Rosemary's Baby, or the organs in The Omen, right?
Or the classic polythetic definition of Tantra by Douglas Brooks, which I think he ripped off from Swami Gehananda Bharati.
And so what is it contextualizing? It's contextualizing the different types and categories of the thing, which in this case is music, right? Contextualizing it within the data of Nightmare on Elm Street, Rosemary's Baby, The Omen, right? Here, you're contextualizing the different themes of Gothic horror. You're contextualizing with people that have studied it, mm-hmm. right? And so all of this stuff it's intersecting what makes scholarship fascinating, which is the primary sources and the secondary scholarship, right? And all of those have been thrown together in one really elegant sentence about what are these Gothic tropes preoccupied with. Does that make sense? And that's really, to me, really good scholarship.
I mean, definitely Cleo's going to have to write one of these sentences on chakras.
Right? And so I mentioned, I'm writing on the possession of men, and a lot of people don't necessarily think of the second film of A Nightmare on Elm Street as a possession of men,
That's
but
my favorite.
it's amazing. And also everyone hates it because of the gay panic that's within it. By everyone, not everyone. That's hyperbole, which is also bad as a writer. But it's funny. There's so many rules in writing that don't really govern when we speak. But many Nightmare on Elm Street fans rather dislike it because of just how different it is, categorically different from the first one, where there's a lot of interesting tidbits, right, going on, and a lot of subtext happening between the protagonist of Jesse Walsh and this possessing entity of Freddy Krueger, that he will possess him and make him kill for him and in his fashion, right? And
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of things going on with what has been called, I think, from BuzzFeed, of the gayest horror film of all time, which is, horribly sensationalizing. And for someone like me, I have no interest in sensationalizing the film, but I find it interesting as a story of a possessed boy, of a possessed teenager. Does that make sense? And so for someone like me, it's important. We have to enumerate. If people are uncomfortable by what is the gay panic associated with this film, right? It is my job as scholar to enumerate what that is, right? Discuss what that is. In what has been called the gayest horror, this is from something that hopefully will come out in the coming year. What has been called the gayest horror film of all time, the film is both mocked and championed for the following content and subtext. There's overt references to what Gail Rubin calls the outer limits of sexuality, mainly the kink twink preferences of Coach Snyder, the subtle imagery and sexual innuendos of Jesse's inhabited world, like the rectum drawn on the board of his biology classroom, or the no out of town chicks sign that hangs on his bathroom door or bedroom door, the degree of sexualizing Jesse Walsh / actor Mark Patton per his bedroom dance scene reminiscent of Risky Business, and eroticizing Freddy Krueger / Robert Englund, who caresses Jesse's lips with his blades, pets his head, and so forth. And finally, the social implications of Jesse's inner torment, the meaning behind Freddy's possession of this young teenager, which many read and register and interpret as some sort of closeted sexual repression, right? That is what makes him weak enough for Freddy to possess him and take over his body, right? And so this is me working through what makes this film uncomfortable for viewers, right? Or if you're because it also has a really cult following within the trans and queer community, what sort of things do they champion? What sort of things do they enjoy seeing? And there's actually some really cool queer performances of this film on stage, which are really fun.
A lot of these can be depicted in a documentary that came out a little while ago called Scream Queen about Mark Patton. And has a lot of interviews with him. It's a really good movie.
It's on Shudder.
Yeah, I was in the GoFundMe thing on it, so I have a physical copy of it.
Yeah. And so like break down what is happening, right? Contextualize what is happening in this film, right? In the ways that we saw with music or with what it is to be gothic, right? Break down what are this homosexual subtext within that film. Does that make sense? And so other things, be creative, right? I remember just like, and that's what a lot of the goal of what is today, of how it is to be writing. I remember coming up with the phrase that you saw in the previous slide of twink kink. I don't know why that made me really enjoy it as a phrase, right? Because in the film, the coach is somewhat implied to be a sexual predator, and has an affinity for young boys in his gym, right? And then they later reveal that he's also into like S&M, and so, or SM. And so like being able to like, oh my God, I could link those two things together, right? Because the film is casting him as deviant, right? And deviant and therefore dangerous, which is the larger tone that it has towards Jesse's potential homosexuality. And so in this gay panic, right, if I could tie those two things together with a simple phrase like kink twink, then that's covering a lot of groundwork in the writing. Does that make sense? And so that's another one of the fun things that I really like about writing, especially with the playing of words, but also being creative. I'm writing something for the Conjuring series, and it's for a volume that I wasn't quite sure if we would get, because I've had this issue with other things that I've written. I would produce screenshots, screen captures of the film, and then they kick it back and say you got to remove it because we can't get the rights to it. And so I was like, okay, so I'll just, circumnavigate that potential problem, and I'll make my own diagrams that mirror what I see happening in the scene. And so, for instance, the Conjuring universe specters do not adhere to the traditional film mechanics. Supernatural entities can shift through walls, instantly close a distance, occupy off-screen spaces, disregard the continuity of lateral left-right movement. In the Annabelle film, the first one, Mia, in her craft room, sees a young specter staring from across the hall. The specter runs clumsily to the door like a child. The door opens inexplicably, shuts the girl in transition, right? Or shuts with the girl in transition. The door immediately slams open to reveal an adult female specter from before, screaming wildly. The director, Dallerman, uses the match cut edit, the simulation of uninterrupted movement, to fool the audience into underestimating the paranormal danger of the scene, right? And so here's my cute little mock-up of young little girl running towards the door. Door shuts. When it opens, it's now adult screaming woman, and that's the scare. Does that make sense? And so I had quite a lot of fun designing these little dumb little pictorials. And then I noticed I'm going to describe to you the scene, and then I'm going to play you what it looks like, and then I'll show you my little dumb SketchUp of it. There's a scare in The Conjuring that subverts the audience's expectations in both timing and registry of terror. Older daughter Andrea awakes to the sound of thuds. She finds her sister Cindy banging her head against the wardrobe in her sleep. She returns Cindy to her bed, but the thuds continue, a sound emanating from inside the wardrobe. She inspects, pulling the doors open with force, but nothing sinister resides inside. Cindy, now awake, gasps at something off screen. Andrea turns and notices Cindy's line of sight. Something rests atop the wardrobe. Andrea turns back, and the camera tilts up, revealing the woman specter perched for attack. The revelation is slow, the timing is unexpected, the registry of terror reinforced with an additional zoom shot before the specter leaps onto Andrea, right? And so, hold on. Let me pull up for you. And apologies if any of you didn't or had no interest in watching some horror footage. But hopefully it's not too scary. I don't think so.
It's not going to be any scarier than the Ramayana.
Okay, so hold on. Let's go here. Mm-hmm. And so I'm watching this, and I'll get to that I haven't seen the Conjuring films ever. And I'm like, I've seen this before, right? And I've noticed something about this. And I remember there's a great video essay on Jackie Chan and Jackie Chan action comedies, right? Specifically, hold on, let me make sure that it's in the right spot. Hold on.
Number 3, Jackie likes clarity. He doesn't do dark scenes where everything is color corrected blue. If his opponent wears black, he wears white. And if his opponent's in white, then he's styling. His framing is so clear that in every shot, he's setting up the next bit of action. Here, even though we're watching the stuntman, 2/3 of the frame is the staircase. A few seconds later, we see why. He keeps things clear by rarely using handheld or dolly moves.
Like an American movie, you can see there's a lot of movement. When the camera angle movement, that means the actor, they don't know how to fight.
In slow motion, you can see how the camera operator swings around to make the hits seem more violent. Actors hold their shots long enough for the audience to feel the rhythm.
The most important part is editing. And most of the directors, they don't know how to editing. Even the stunt coordinator, they don't know how to editing.
Hong Kong directors like Jackie and Sammo cut a particular way. In the first shot, you hit your opponent in the wide. In the second shot, you get a nice close-up. But when you cut the shots together, you don't match continuity. At the end of shot 1, the elbow is here. At the beginning of shot 2, it's all the way back here. These 3 frames are for the audience's eyes to register the new shot, and they make all the difference.
I'm start from here, here. But 2 shots combined, this is zoom. That's power.
In other words, show it twice.
So, okay, pause. And then we'll go back to The Conjuring. Did anyone get what was going on with the editing there of don't match continuity? In the first shot, right, the elbow's here, it hits the guy on the abdomen, right? The next shot, the elbow is further away, right? If you match continuity, the elbow would already be in his abs, right? So why are they repeating the action? Does that make sense? They're showing the hit twice, even though it happens so fast. But why are they showing it twice? Anyone have thoughts?
I'd imagine it's for the audience's benefit, so they can process what's going on.
Sure, right? And so what's fascinating, as I was watching this Conjuring film, right? You have the shot of Andrea turns to Sydney. Sydney sees something on the top of the wardrobe, right? The camera tilts up, revealing that the specter has been there the whole time, right? Then the camera zooms in, right? There's already kind of like a picture of her in the shot. Zoom in, then zoom out, and then she jumps off for the attack, right? All of that is to register the terror, right, of the specter on top of the wardrobe. Does that make sense? And it's repeat action. It's meant to draw it out. It's meant to draw the suspense, right, of this thing that is lurking, right? And it's rather fun to see that type of artistry in what otherwise would be really shitty ass films. And another fun thing that I would recommend for you to do, in addition to being creative, is collecting language, right? I remember reading Douglas Cowan, and for some of you have you ever heard of the phrase of Deus ex machina? It comes from theater, but it happens a lot, but in writing, or narrative, I should say. Does anyone know what is Deus ex machina? Either what it literally means or how it's used in fiction writing.
It's like the machine from God or of God or something like that. It's just like a kind of like something that comes out of nowhere to help. Yeah, with the plot or resolve the plot or something.
Or the heroes of it, right? And so it's for any of you that saw or read the last Lord of the Rings, right? The Eagles, like, how do they get out? They take 3 movies to get to Mordor. How the hell do they get back home? Oh, the Eagles fly in and pick them up and take them back, right? The Eagles that have not been in any part of this movie or even set up that's a thing, right? It's just a quick save. It's as if the machine or the hand of God has come out to assist them. And Doug Cowan wrote a really fun phrase of Diabolus ex machina. Which is really fascinating, right? Of what if it wasn't the hand of God to come and save them, but some bad supernatural force. And I was like, that's amazing, turn of a phrase. That's an amazing piece of language, right? That, I put into the writing and cited him accordingly, right? And so it's like, be playful with language. And so Aaron mentioned I'm writing something on Mad Max, right? At some point, and by the way, what about Mad Max? All sorts of things, not just the films, but the video games, the artwork, the comic books, all sorts of things, right? Diversify the data. But at some point it occurred to me that when people were writing, for any of you that don't know about Mad Max, of like post-apocalyptic bedlam in near future Australia, scholars of Mad Max typically divide their focus between the madness of the series protagonist, Max, who is mad, and the world he inhabits, which is mad to the max. Does that make sense? And so at some point I had that realization and was like, oh, I got to run home and run this and write this down, right? Or put it in whatever it is that I could do.
Yeah,
And so,
let me pause you on that. I want something a little bit more methodological from you, specifically there. Do you keep a little book with you? Do you make a little note in your phone? Where do you keep track of these? Oh, that's coming? All right.
It's coming, right? Of what it is, because the point that I'm wanting to make for you today is you're kind of always writing, right? There are times in which you are going to sit down based on a deadline or a class or whatever it is and pump things out, but there's moments where it's going to sort of take over your thought process, and you're going to be just ideas are going to come to you when you least expect them, and do the best that you can to preserve those ideas, right? And so, hold on. I'll give an example of this. This is for any of you that know David Lee Roth. He was the lead singer of Van Halen, right? And Joe Rogan is going to ask him, hey, how do you write? And keep in mind that David Lee Roth has consumed many drugs in his day, and there's going to be a disconnect between him and Joe Rogan. But what he is saying, I'll give you the key, is if you just say, oh, here's the bit of music, write lyrics to the music. He's going to say, if I just sit here right now and try and write, I'm going to come up with really shitty rhymes, right? Of, throw your hands up in the air because I just don't care, or whatever, right? It's not going to be what he's typically known for doing with his lyrics, right? And so, hold on.
Notice also, William is diversifying the data he's showing us in his presentation.
I am. Here we go.
Okay. When you guys wrote songs, how did you put the lyrics to the music? What was the process? Like, how did you guys sort that out? So would you come to them with an idea? Would they come to you with a riff? Like, how would it work?
It'll work a number of ways, but a mistake that a lot of young writers in my department, the lyrics, make is that they think of it as secondary. They wait for the music or the track first, and then you'll walk into a studio and hope that the hand of God will descend and grace you with amazing epiphanies. I can't even spell amazing. All right? And called upon to do it right away. You'll work out a beat and go, Dave, you got some lyrics. If I go walk into that room and try to create it right there, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be Moon in June. Right? Moon in June. Really? When? Sometime soon. What time of day? I'm thinking noon. And literally, I'm going to put my hands in the air. Why? Well, because I just don't care. You wind up there unless you're banking. Think like debate. If you're going to debate somebody, you're banking your ideas.
Right.
All right? And whatever the subject is, you can go. You don't even have to have a subject. It's, okay, I like what he just said. Okay, I might even write that phrase. I like what you just said. It could be a Drake lyric. You dig? Any expressions, ideas, slogans, anything that comes from other tunes in terms of their lyric.
And is everybody contributing?
No, that's just me. I have volumes of those kinds of ideas for songs, storylines, etc. You would never go into a fight without doing that. Collecting moves from every other film of every other fighter that you possibly can, so that when somebody goes like this, you go, oh, I know what to do. So-and-so from Zundas, and then I'm going to visit like this. And somebody says, it's a song about, they play a song, I go, wow, it sounds kind of like cowboy music. Let's write about cowboys. Going through the banking, Giddy Up. That's a cool title. I heard a cowboy say it on the TV set. And I wrote it down, literally. Okay? And you I see the lights coming. Yeah. And you start banking. Okay, somebody says something. You dig? I heard somebody, a waitress named Pepper, with an unlit Pall Mall cigarette, tell me, "Oh, honey, nothing could have stopped us back then anyway." That's a title.
That is a title.
I wrote a song to it.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Where was this waitress?
On the road.
Just
Well, she also had something else to say. She'd lean over, she'd show me that cleavage a little bit, and she'd look, she'd go, "Keep your fork, honey. There's pie." Excuse me, I gotta stand up. And you write it down.
Yeah.
Banking.
Yeah.
I like the term they use in debate. You're banking.
And so one more thing, and then we're going to discuss this a bit about banking, where you're always writing, right? Another sadly drugged up example that I'm going to give you is Mitch Hedberg, for anyone that knows of Mitch Hedberg's comedy, who wrote a lot of like silly non sequiturs. He didn't really write bits that strung together or stories, right? And so hold on.
I opened up a yogurt, and underneath the lid it said, "Please try again." They were having a contest I was unaware of, but I thought I might have opened the yogurt wrong. Or maybe your play was trying to inspire me. Come on, Mitch, don't give up. Please try again. A message of inspiration from your friends at Yo Play. Fruit on the bottom, hope on top. I used to do drugs. I still do, but I used to too.
Mitch sadly dies of an overdose, but here was his then partner sharing his writing process.
There. I love artists that talk about their process a little bit. Artists. So any joke that I think Mitch had about actually being a comedian or writing is interesting to me and maybe interested to comedians and his fans. Like the joke about if I go, I have a pen, I write it down.
As a comedian, I sit at my hotel at night, I think of something funny, then I go get a pen and I write it down. Or if the pen's just too fucking far away, I try to convince myself that what I thought of ain't funny.
There's a sometimes perception of Mitch as a comedian, not by comedians, but like I've read people are like, yeah, he just got on stage and wrote that and said that, which is insane. And I don't think people know there's so much work that goes into a comedian, and he put tons of hard work into it. But he would write constantly, and I have lots of his notebooks, so many notes. He would just write thoughts. Mitch had this kind of neat, interesting writing. It was like kind of triangular, and I think it stemmed from copying his dad. And we would be on the road, and sometimes he would go out and sign things, or if people came in, but it was always in that great writing, and it would take forever.
Okay, hold on. I'll do my Mitch Hedberg impression. I know people who believe in ghosts, but don't believe in themselves. It's sad, okay? You think you'll never make it as a musician, but last night you saw a translucent caveman. I'm an impulse shoplifter.
You can see the beginning of a Dufresne joke, and it used to be Anderson's party at 5 because that's his sister's last name. And you can see the evolution of a joke through his writing.
Hey, someone said, "Hey, Mitch, do you lift weights?" I said, "No, but I do set weights back down. So if you get up there and you need help, call me. I will take you to the next level." Hey, I walked by a dry cleaner at 3 a.m. The sign said, "Sorry, we're closed." You don't have to be sorry. It's 3 a.m. and you're a dry cleaner. It would be ridiculous for me to expect it to be open. I'm not going to walk in at 10 a.m.
sometimes a kind of way to get jokes out, he would do free writing. And what I'm so glad that he left behind is some of these free writings is kind of, I can tell what was going on in his life. Like there's a free writing situation here where he talks about how he left his motorhome in Tampa, and I wish I was the first comedian to fly, because then I could have had first crack at all the potential jokes. Right?
And so all that to get to is that you're constantly writing and banking ideas. Sometimes you bank phrases, right? Oh, is it Max who is mad, or is the world mad to the max, right? Like you're banking phrases, you're banking ideas, right? As Aaron mentioned, with my stuff, sometimes you're not quite sure when the market is going to be ready for your ideas, right? And so for me, I wrote my undergraduate honors thesis, right? That's in 2013 on Van Helsing and Lancaster Marin and The Exorcist, right? That's 2013. I show up as an undergrad telling Aaron about this, saying at some point I'm going to write this into a longer publishable thing. I don't know when that is, but I'm going to work on other stuff until then, right? Then I get a call if I call me online, that The Revenant is doing a special issue on The Exorcist because it turns 50 years this year, and they're looking for new directions on what to do with it. I got something in the bank, right? There it is, Lancaster Marin, Abraham Van Helsing, Traditions of Cosmic Combat, 2013, right? That's 10 years. Cosmic Combat, the myths and practices of vigilante exorcism. Did it take me 10 years to write it? No. It took 10 years for someone to want to read it. Does that make sense? Which is really weird and fascinating, right? Same thing with, like, I still have Aaron has seen 2 of my papers at AAR, right? On specifically possession in like African-American context and popular media, of the Boondocks, of Get Out, of Masters of the Sun, etc. And it's just sitting in the bank until the time comes where I'm ready to put it out, or a call comes where people want to do it, right? And so you're banking not just, your writing and your ideas, you're banking data, right? So hold on, I'll show you my fun, boring office.
Oh, you're UCSB.
I was walking at Target and I was like, oh, hey, the Conjuring films are out on, cheap because nobody fucking cares anymore. And I'm like, I'm just going to buy them. I have never seen them, quite frankly, because I hate them. I've tried. I've been forced to watch them with friends. And I was like, I really don't like this. But at some point, I'm going to have to write on this because I study possession and exorcism. And this is going to be important, right? I don't know when, but it is. Then last year, here's a call for an edited volume on chapters related to The Conjuring. Okay, the time has come. I have them here. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to watch them. I'm going to write about it. I knew this day would come. I prolonged it as much as I could because this is not something that I wanted to watch for myself, but had to watch for work. And the work has finally come. Does that make sense?
Sort of like getting these cheap Tantra things, or look at that weirdness there.
Yeah.
This stuff's going to come up one of these days.
Yeah. I have tons of things of either objects or data points that you're banking constantly, right? This Conjuring stuff, I also wrote on the Amityville when I was studying for my exams. That's like 2018. I went and took that work that I was writing on Amityville, because it's involving the Ed and Lorraine Warren, right? And hey, let me put that into this thing that I'm writing on The Conjuring, right? And so you're banking your ideas, you're banking work, you're banking funny phrases, things that you hear, but you're also banking data. And at some point, something's going to come by and you're going to have to write on that. Thoughts on any of this?
Incredible resources that you shared. Those were super fun to watch. I think that I've actually been thinking about this recently, just because I feel like I bank bank ideas a decent amount, but then I had this thought recently that was like, is this neurotic of me? Am I gonna, can I just trust that I'll remember this? So it's actually hilarious that you're saying this now, because literally this week I was like, I don't think I need to write this stuff down anymore.
I mean, the answer is yes, it's neurotic. All of us are neurotic at some degree. And so absolutely. But if you're good at remembering this stuff, then that's for you, For someone like me, especially if it's something so small or maybe you don't understand it yet, you notice that there's something here and I haven't yet picked it up as to why I find it interesting or why I think it's important. But either way, save it and I'll flesh it out later, right?
Yeah, and you can do just like Mitch Hedberg did with like
Yes.
a little phrase. You write it down, then you go back.
Yeah.
And often what I'll do is I'll get that little phrase, and it'll even be something I already know. I'll do this often with stuff I've already worked out, but I'll just do free writing on it for 20 minutes, and I'll realize there was something that I didn't know about it that I learned while writing about it.
And like someone like Hedberg, he's so interested in rhythm. He's interested in words. He's interested in sounds. And so I'm guaranteeing that at some point, because it's a non sequitur, it doesn't belong in the joke. At some point, he was like, hey, you know what's really funny? The word translucent. Hey, you know what's really funny? Caveman, right? Then he's writing a joke about ghosts, right? The initial setup is that you believe in ghosts, but don't believe in yourself, right? And then it leads you to just put in this odd phrase that he finds funny of last night you saw a translucent caveman, right? That got him funny, that got him to laugh. He thought it was clever, throw it in, right? But his notes, and you can I'll send these things to Aaron if you want to keep watching his notes. And I think a lot of them are being digitized, are just a bunch of these different odd non sequiturs, right? The ocean is God's aquarium, right? He's just like madness, right? And then again, the two examples I give you of David Lee Roth and Mitch Hedberg are drugged out of their mind. I am not drugged out of my mind, and I am implementing a lot of the same things in my writing. do any of you know, so Jason Voorhees, which is the hockey mask one here, right? Famously doesn't talk, right? And at some point, I'm thinking to myself and I'm writing, hold on, where is the bit from?
I remember William and I were talking about the Friday the 13th series, and I came to this conclusion that I've never done anything with, but it's really interesting because William ran with it in exciting ways. Jason Voorhees is a yaksha.
Yeah. Of like water dwelling. Yeah. And
water dwelling, forest dwelling.
Of the lake, right? And so, hold on. Friday 13th franchise is principally defined as a dysfunctional family drama that spills into a body count-oriented slasher narrative featuring elaborate and/or graphic killings of altruist, sexually expressive subjects perpetrated mostly by a white male queer, slow-moving, mask-wearing mute brute. I wrote that down as a note. I was like, oh my God, I can say he's a mute brute.
Mute brute's good.
I don't know why. That fascinated me as a word, as a term. Just like translucent caveman. I don't know why, but I was like, I need to put that in there. Same with kink twink, right? There's just something there that there's a lot of things going into such a short phrase. And that for me is something so fun to read and so fun to write, right? Same with Mad to the Max or Max Who Is Mad, right? And so these are also what you said of we were talking about Australia in Mad Max, but it's near future Australia. It hasn't happened, right? And it's also this like strange world post-apocalyptic thing. And so if Max is the vehicle of this world, we were like, hey, we're going to call it Maxstralia. To say we're not talking about Australia, we're talking about this fictional post-apocalyptic world where Max is the vehicle. It is Maxstralia, right? And so all these things are not just like funny play on words. They're analytic devices, right? For you to explain, for it to govern your writing. I've been talking a lot. Good students, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the whole banking thing is a great tool. Um, Sometimes when I'm doing that though, I can't remember where I wrote something down. Um,
Yeah,
but
you have to reread your notes. That's the funny
yeah,
thing. And I've talked to you about this before. When I'm taking notes on like a secondary source, or even if I'm translating, if I get an idea, I write in capital letters, note. And then I know that everything there is after that note is something that's mine. And
Yeah.
I'm not, misattributing it to the person that I'm taking notes on. And often I'll go back and I'll be rereading, notes on a book, and I'll find one of those little big note, and I'll be like, that's it. That's the problem. That's what I was looking for. I didn't know I already knew that.
Absolutely.
But it's very important to distinguish between a quote that you're writing down and a thought of your own, because therein lies the way to danger.
But yeah, so like you're banking words, phrases, things that you come across. You're also, and you can do that on paper or digital, whatever it is that you're doing. And so yeah, be systematic on what you're doing, right? I am because I do a lot of multimedia, right? I even bank here. Hold on, where is it? Talk about the neurosis. Hold on, where is hold on. Now I can't find it. Where is the damn? Oh, that's why. Because I was still in full screenshot mode. Talk about the neurosis. I log every movie I've ever seen.
I always wished I would have done that.
Every single one, right? And there's a really dumb website that's cheap and weird. The handle is even Road Warrior, which is funny. And so, like, oh, what have I seen recently? I saw the shitty ass Conjuring films, which I only liked 2 of them. I liked The Curse of La Llorona and Annabelle Comes Home. I saw a horrible movie with Ben Affleck called Deep Water. I saw Wakanda Forever. I liked that. I never saw While You Were Sleeping. We saw it during Christmas, along with other random ass ones that my wife really wanted to watch. I saw Emily the Criminal. I saw 2 documentaries for the gaming class. I saw Last Night in Soho, The Menu, Bullet Train, Love Gilda on Gilda Radner documentary, the recent shitty ass M. Night Shyamalan movie. And all of that goes into the bank, right? And at any time, this is like anything I've ever seen, which is now what number is I've logged in to 2244 different things that I've seen in my life. And if I then want to go to favorite it, what did I give to a thumbs up? And I go here. And I'm like, okay, let me go see, is there anything interesting that I could assign to a class that I could pull from, that I could do something with ideas, right? And so I'm even banking there, right? Dusty Hosley, I don't know if you ever met Dusty Aaron. He logs in every book he's ever read, which is a little too much for me. But
there was a software I was using that for a couple of years back in the day, and I stopped.
Yeah. And so it's like you're banking data constantly, you're banking ideas, you're banking your experiences, you're banking all of that. And it's not just so that it takes you forever to write. Again, you also need to know what the market is asking for, because this is the problem, right? Are you creating the opportunity for your research, or are you seizing the opportunity that is there for your research, right? And so you don't need to seize it, right? If you really believe in your stuff, pitch it randomly to a journal, to a chapter, to something, right? Because you think, hey, this has worth, this has contributions, right? But then you need to then do the heavy lifting of why it's important for an outsider to care about it, right? But if it's an edited volume or a special edition or something that is already interested in that topic, then a lot of that work is being done for you. Does that make sense? And so then get something from the bank and ship it along. The time has now come where they care about this thing. And I am ready to seize that opportunity when it comes.
Well,
on also banking, but yeah.
Not to belabor the metaphor, but it accrues interest in the bank.
Yeah.
And one thing that I mentioned before in the class is crock pot cooking, which is you're always writing. Sometimes it's just putting a bunch of stuff in the crock pot that is your head and letting it go for 8 hours while it's mulling about until it becomes a beautiful stew. But the thing with crock pot cooking is you get seduced into thinking, well, I'm writing when I'm just doing other stuff. You have to actually You know, I think crockpot cooking works really well if you write out what you want to think about and then come back to it a day or 2 days later. But it's important that you've written that thing out in advance. Otherwise, it's just brain farts, which there's nothing wrong with.
Cleo, what are your thoughts on any of this madness?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think what I took away from it as well is the creativity that you're putting into it. And I think that's really refreshing because a lot of academic writing is very dry. So I kind of liked how you were playing around with concepts more in like a fun way. So, yeah.
Yeah, like there's anything that you're watching, anything that you're consuming or reading, right? Like you can learn from the comedy writing of Mitch Hedberg. You can write, or you can learn from what, you know, drugged out of his mind David Lee Roth is telling Joe Rogan on his podcast, right? Like I'm writing on The Conjuring, and I have a clear reference to how Jackie Chan edits his fight scenes. And I put it in, and they wanted to cut it out for space. And I was like, I'll find the space elsewhere. I want that in here. I want that in here because I want to show that you can get knowledge and information from really strange and odd places, right? To the point that David White's stuff on South Asia changes who I am as an Americanist scholar that works on media and doom and gloom and other things.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what to do with Indian magic because I read everything, which wasn't that much, written on Indian magic, despite there being tons of primary sources. And it wasn't until I was reading on magic in the Hellenistic world, different area, different time period, but suddenly I had the moves that I couldn't get my head around before. But those moves also gave me a chance to see that my instincts were right. And often our instincts are right. Sometimes they're wrong, but it helps when you're reading along, you see somebody doing the same thing you want to do in another context, and that gives you more confidence to do that thing in your context.
Can I return to Kendall's question about what it means to diversify data and diversify interpretation, right? Because here it's like we're talking about what it means to be writing as an academic, and I'm showing you clips of what it means to write as a stand-up comedian or to write as a, you know, classic rock, you know, musician, right? And that's diversifying our data for this conversation, right? And it's then changing what is the interpretation of banking, right? But their interpretation of banking is ideas, right? Strange words, strange phrases, playing with language, right? And that's a big part of it. And yet I'm diversifying the interpretation of what it means to bank, not just by ideas that it didn't take me 10 years to write something, right? I was banking data. I was banking the, you know, banking my thoughts on a certain topic, right? Should the opportunity then arise in the future, I will seize it. That's a different form of banking than what Mitch Hedberg or David Lee Roth are talking about, right? And so by throwing all those things together, we have a different interpretation of what to do with that creative enterprise of writing. Does that make sense? Kendall, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it makes it a lot more engaging, and it just makes it a lot more accessible for audiences. I think that especially to bring in different references from pop culture from a variety of mediums, it also is pretty, I feel like it's also pretty illuminating. It offers a different perspective to see the ways in which this is subliminally, I don't know how to say that, but like, you know, how it subliminally influences our culture and shows up in a variety of ways.
Yeah. And what's funny, this is kind of like my beef with like memes, because I love memes and I love, you know, short little videos. The problem is that shit ain't searchable, right? It's just not. And it's sad because sometimes I really like a joke and I really like a meme, and then it's gone forever and I search for it and I can never get it back, right? And so, like, I'm not sure what would happen if you Google David Lee Roth banking, if it would come up. I don't know. The only reason I know it's there is because I noted when I saw the damn video, right? Same with Mitch Hedberg or whatever else. And so that's the other problem with this stuff is, yes, we live in the digital age where so many things are keyword tagged and searchable, but there's also such a surplus of media and content that unless you're banking it, you may not immediately remember where all these things are that you heard or that you consumed. Does that make sense? And so you kind of need to log that information for yourself because there's so much of it that you'll likely lose a lot of it too. Same thing with like the Jackie Chan bit, right? Connecting Jackie Chan with that editing to how The Conjuring is setting up scares, right? Is only that connection is only made because I logged both of them in my mind or on paper or digitally or whatever. It's not something that is searchable until I fucking publish it, and now it's searchable.
Okay. We're going to talk to William for, I think, about 15 more minutes. Then we're going to talk for a minute, and then we're going to be done. I think about some questions as I ask a question to Williams about any questions you would like to ask him, any observations you can make, any ways you think you can use the techniques and ideas presented here as takeaways. So my question to you, William, is one that I'm going to ask pretty much all of our people that will be speaking with us, is what are your writing rituals? How long do you write? How much do you write? What's your what's your process for writing? Where do you write? Can you just tell us a little bit about your writing life and how your life can support an active writing schedule, and what an active writing schedule looks like for you?
To be clear, to go back to the neurosis question of all this, if I'm always writing, if I'm always banking, that creates a problem for like the personal life. So for instance, I'm in a committed relationship with a woman that tells me I write too damn much, or where I need to turn it off, right? And so that can also be on the back burner of this, of a cost of like being able to shut it off and not be thinking about something is something that I'm still working on, right? Especially as it impacts not just me, but my livelihood with someone else, right? And so that is sort of the backlash of always thinking and always writing about things. I teach twice a week now, and I have friends that like they know that I'm on Monday, Wednesday schedule, and they see me every day of the week and sometimes on weekends. And they're like, why do you come here? I was like, I always have work to do. There's always work to be doing, even though I'm not, here for office hours or whatever else. And so I'm getting better at limiting when I take off to home and when I'm stopping, but always be in a space where you are creating something. And that's not to say that every idea that you have is gold and it's going to go somewhere, but there's a lot of times where you hit dead ends, right? Where like, okay, I figured out every which way I can try and think of and navigate this type of thing, and I'm unhappy with where it has led me. And so then if even save that though, because you never know, sometimes that may surprise you. But no, not every idea that you have is incredible and is amazing. And a lot of things just need to keep more time to think about. And so I have a lot of those things too. But I'm sort of always dedicating time. I'm usually easily distracted, and so I have to kind of be in a closed space of either things that I'm not paying attention to. I can work in a Starbucks, but that's because I don't care about anything that's in a Starbucks. And so either one. But if I'm actually surrounded by people that I want to talk to, or music I want to hear, or a movie I want to watch, I'm not usually going to be productive. I have to kind of have the removal of stimulus in order to just think about something. I've also found I'm more creative during the day. I'm a morning person, which means I'm functionally useless at night. Figure out your own creative juices and figure out what time that happens. But does that mean that I can't be productive at night? No. That just means I'm less creative at night. And so I reserve dumb, like brute work. Oh, I need to grade responses, or I need to, do citations. I need to do something that's just like grunt work that is not require that much free thinking, creativity stuff. And so also figuring out when that is happening, and so that you're still being productive, even if it's just mindlessly doing something, right? Or even just reading. Sometimes I'm actually writing while reading. I'll make little line comments, but reading at times can also even be like a passive thing. And I'll just underline thing or circle something, and I'll come back to it and go and look at what did I underline or circle? What did I highlight? And now I'm actually thinking about doing something with that, right? That can also happen at night, and then I'll return to it in the future. But I think I've answered all of your questions so far. I don't know if there was another one I missed, but how do I write, and what am I writing? How do I think, whatever.
Okay, I got one last big one, and then we're going to hear from the students. Have you ever got stuck? And how did you get out of it? What are some writing difficulties you've had? And what strategies did you use to get around them or just manage them?
I will also say, in connecting this question to the previous one, I kind of have the opposite problem. I write too much. I overwrite, right? And it actually influences where I publish. I purposely seek out places that either have really large word count or no max limits, right? That are willing to work with my really big thing, right? Like the big document that I'm doing. So what I do is I write a lot, and then the rest of it is refining it, right? Of trying to, cut it out, like fewer words, the better, maybe cut it in half, something like that. And so I usually write a lot, and then the rest of it is cutting it down, refining it, right? I believe in the edited volume that I sent to Aaron, it was, way too long. And then the rest of it was like, oh, we have to cut this down, right? That's most of everything I've ever written, right? Is a problem with, it's my own issues of like my own insecurities as a writer too. I think I only have one shot to tell you about this topic. Mm-hmm. And so here it all is, right? And that's my own insecurity as a writer. Whereas as opposed to being confident with like, this will be enough, here you go, right? If any of you care and read my writing, I also have a lot of insecurities about how different thoughts are connected. And so I overcompensate it with a bunch of and thens or therefores and thus. Like to me, those are like,
I cut almost every single one of them out of your chapter.
Yeah, because those are, in my mind, those are like magic words of like hand holding the reader. Like, don't get lost that I'm now transitioning to this thing. Yeah. If I sprinkle in the therefores and the thens, then
I'm forever cutting those out of people's work.
Yeah, you'll lead me this bridge from one idea to the other. And as I get older, I'm getting more confident where I don't need that stuff. And so I'm hoping to then get more confident that I don't need all these damn footnotes, all these damn, so much long text, all that stuff, where it is changing how I'm writing. And so it's a little bit different. I don't really get writer's block. The closest I got to it was when the Rona first struck, because everything was in lockdown. Like I wasn't teaching for a bit because I was on, I had funding, but I ended up teaching, and that was actually better because it gave me a fucking routine that I was good at, right? And so when Monday is no different from Friday, you're just stuck in this monotonous void, right? And I had no structure to actually keep me working and keep me writing. And then the things that I was working on, publications, they were delayed, right? I have so many things that are in press because of coronavirus, right? The AER, I have a paper at a online or at a conference. It's been canceled. It's been moved online, right? It's just been delayed till next year, right? These things were cutting out structure in my life. And that was such a horrible, like monotonous void for me productively that it was hard to get around. And if you look at my CV, I have a lot of things that were co-authored because I was like, hey, I have no community. I have no structure. Can I please reach out to this person and maybe they'll join me in writing this thing? And then it'll be us sort of with each other. And that made it better, right? And so my early stuff has a lot of co-authors because of it, because that was me trying to find community and structure, at least with another person, to get me out of, it wasn't even necessarily writer's block, but it was a lack of motivation. that was really difficult for me.
And as you mentioned earlier, I wonder too, since you lost that, maybe you lost your office or dedicated workspace, so you were at home where there were also a lot more distractions.
Yeah, that was also tough, and thankfully, you know, and my wife also works from home and did during that time, and so that was also something to get used to, right? Where I was just sort of there for the longest time, and it was hard to get, you know, working. And yeah, I would love to say that I found a clever way to get through it, but in those opening months, I didn't. There was just so many months lost, you know, that I just couldn't do it. I couldn't power through it. And it wasn't until I reached out and started doing co-authored stuff that I would then leave the home and meet with other people, you know, outside in a park or something that was where we were neither, you know, where it was ventilated or something like that that was more responsible. But yeah, and then slowly things started to pick more up. I was teaching again, then I had the office space. And so, yeah, should it happen again, I think I'll be better prepared for it. But in that initial run, no, that was a lot of wasted months. And it was hard for me.
Okay, in the last 5 minutes or so, any takeaways, questions, thoughts? Let's use William as best we can.
Yeah, I definitely have a question. And I know that this is less about your techniques, but I just have to know. So, you know, looking at your CV, I saw that you studied mathematics and then switched to religious studies with a focus on exorcism. And I'm just so curious, well, I guess, you know, what interests you in that, even though I know that's a large question, but I know we've only got 5 minutes and you've published vastly, but what should we know about exorcism?
To answer them, again, I have the problem with brevity, but to answer somewhat succinctly, I went to the University of Rochester and just there was no core curriculum, which is why I chose that school. I could take anything I want, right? I never had to take bio or physics or chem or anything that I didn't want to do. And thankfully, mathematics counted as a natural science, and that's what kind of got me out of it. But I just applied for all these classes and got them. And then I was like, hey, I'm not taking math and I'm in college. And I don't know, I was just such a nerd that I was like, I don't feel like I'm in school if I'm not taking math. Like it doesn't feel real to me, you know? Are you really in college? You're not taking math. And I really liked math. Math for me is like I don't know if any of you have ever been good at a sport or at an instrument where eventually you were on the field or in the room with much better players than you. And so that was me with math. I still love math, but at some point I was in the room with people where I was like, I can't math like you. And so I'll just love math on my own over there. I don't need to be doing this for a living. And so I still took math classes because I don't know, I just didn't, it was a good way of working that other part of my brain. If I ever felt where I was stuck on a math, this I guess kind of like a writer's block thing. If I felt stuck on a paper, I would switch to math. If I felt stuck on a problem set, I'd switch to writing. And there were different parts of my brain, right? And I think that's what I also still do with when teaching is if I ever get sick of creatively producing something, I'll switch back to the monotonous stuff of math and grading, which is pretty fun for me. But I was a philosophy major. Then I took philosophy classes and realized I hated philosophy. And part of the reason why I hated it is because it was disconnected from people. I felt that I was always reading things abstractly and it was disconnected from human bodies. And for me, religion wasn't. Anytime we were talking about a religious concept or a thing, it was connected to a person, a group, a place, whatever. And I loved that aspect of it. I also wanted to research things that I felt weren't in the curriculum until I put them there. And so I started I took an independent study on Satanism and Satan throughout, you know, history, and then follow the data of where I can make a contribution. And so I want to learn about Satan because no one's teaching me about this. And so I took a class, or I made a class on that as a directed reading independent study, right? And then it was like, okay, what can I do with this further? I want to study satanic encounters today. Turns out there ain't that many of them. People ain't selling their souls at the crossroads to learn how to play guitar like the old days. But what is far more common are possession experiences of lower demons, ghosts, ghouls, whatever. And I went and looked at the literature, found out there's a lot of stuff written on possession and less so written on exorcism. And so follow the data of where I can make a contribution to this field, right? I can, if you have me back, I'll tell you even more about fun math stuff. I took an independent study on chaos theory just because it wasn't offered, and I wanted to learn about chaos theory. Then when TAing Indic civilization and learning about Jain cosmology, I'm like, I can do a lecture on how the Jain cosmology of reincarnation is a chaotic system. And it's the butterfly effect. It's sensitive to initial conditions, right? You have to be careful of all this different karma that you're generating because it can influence your rebirth in so many different places, right? There's always a karmic way for you to be reincarnated as any other thing in that system. There's a karma that exists for you to be reborn as a worm, to be reborn as a dog, to be reborn as a man, whatever else, right? There's a system in which, upon iteration, there's a way for you to get from point A to point B for every point in that space. And unlike other cosmology systems of reincarnation, the Jains have a position where sometimes you return back to a bad place. Let's say you were a hell being, and then you karmically get better and get to another place, but then you fuck up again, you go right back. The Jains have a class of people that are like that are forever doomed to be caught in that system, which means upon iteration, mathematically, some points eventually return back to themselves. And that's a chaotic system. And so, like, at some point, even my math stuff occasionally shows up into my weird religious studies interest, right? And so you are a conditioned intellectual being. Store that stuff as much as you can, and I think you'll be all the better for it.
Thank you so much, William. I don't have anything to say in closing except that this was it was my honor and pleasure always to spend time with you. And I think this was very useful. And I appreciate you putting together this lecture. And I hope that you will bank this lecture and deliver it to other grad students and writers. And I think they'll be all the better for it. So thank you very much. We have a tradition in Europa that I find weird, but I'll do anyway. And I will bow out. So thank you, William. I'm going to talk to these students for a little while longer. I put up that link that you sent me to that essay about Doug Brooks. It's on Canvas. And if you send me any of the materials from today, I'll put them up on Canvas for the students.
No, thank you for having me here. And good luck to you with your writing. You can get my email, and if you ever want to chat more. But good luck to whatever it is that you're doing in the future.
Thanks so much, William.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, students. So really quickly, what I talked to Ben a little bit, and I need to get him on the phone. It appears to me that there is not an official defense, but I think he wants you to do some sort of a presentation on your master's thesis in this class, which is fine. I was already planning on having you do that. I would venture to say that if you asked for a defense, you could get one. Also, as I looked, it appears that you do not have to have a committee of 3 scholars. I think it'll be just Ben that will sign off. So you're really writing just with him and not with 2 other authors, which is different from most master's theses. Do you have, so at this point, do you have any other questions that you would like me to bring to him to get clarification on? Because I'll tell you, he sent me a bunch of stuff and I'm not much clearer.
Is the presentation, do you mean like a PowerPoint or just talking?
What you'll do is you'll talk through your paper. That would be the presentation with the PowerPoint. Now, I had toyed with the idea of doing an AAR style. So that would be, you will present your paper in 10 to 12 minutes with a PowerPoint. And at the AAR, the majority of us read our papers. So you basically create, I would argue, between a 9 and 11 page version of your paper that lays out the thorough argument and the takeaways, and then gives a select set of data, like some of your best data, relatively briefly. All right, so I will get him on the phone and ask all of my torturous questions. And I will present that to you. For next week, I have a reading selected that I'll get up on Canvas, and I want you to do an annotated bibliography. So what did I have you write for today? And I know I didn't have you turn it in, correct? So what did you write today? Tell me real quick. 1, 2, 3. Tell me what you wrote today.
was like a 250 word summary about something we were researching.
Yeah. Did you? So what did you write it on?
Well, I was reading an article on Montric coding. I think I went kind of beyond the 250 limit. I didn't. Yeah.
That's okay. You should be doing that in your notes. But the reason I asked for 250 words is in an annotated bibliography. What you do, and you can read these out there. And I had a professor that would assign them as a final paper in class, which I thought was really useful. You give the bibliographic information, and then short, 250 words max summary. And the summary can even, I'm going to give you a thing from Umberto Eco about this. It can even, your summary can be really brief. Nothing useful here, but you have a record of it. And your annotated bibliography should have a very brief summary of the topic, the main argument, and then you should have written almost for yourself what you could use it for, how to make it useful. So for next week, and I'll give you I just wanted you to do it once. And I didn't even want to look at it. So for the next week, I want you to have 5 entries. So, and I'd like 3 of them to be new to you. And that can, if you did one that was new to you this week, that counts. So 5 entries, at least 3 of them new to you. All right, Kendall, what did you do? What did you read? What did you read?
Philip Dislipe's article from Maharaj Mahan Tantrik.
Yes, that's an excellent article. Right. Philip just actually put out a really good essay recently. I have my issues with Philip, but he is such a fantastic scholar. Okay, so you read that. What did you write in your 250 words? Just give it to me real simple.
That he took kind of 2 different streams and combined it into one to present Kundalini Yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan or Yogi Bhajan.
Yeah, Yogi Bhajan did that, and Philip kind of sketches that out.
Mm-hmm.
Good. All right, so 250 words, and what you do is you'd have that, and then what I like to do in an annotated bibliography is like the last couple of sentences, I say, this has implications for X, Y, and Z, and that helps me code back what I'm doing. An annotated bibliography is a great thing to do, not only when you start doing your research, but in the middle of your research to kind of collect everything so you can speak on it with ease. And also by collecting all of those bibliographic informations, you're building out your bibliography. All right, Cleo, what did you do?
I read Ben's translation of the Viveka Martanda.
Ah, all right. So
which
what
is
did you write about?
the yoga text. Well, it has the chakra system in it, the same one that. So I have the Shiva Samhita, but this is another text I can use to show its inclusion in Hatha Yoga.
Yeah, so you'd summarize his argument, what the chakra system is, and then write briefly, I can use this in my work, blah, 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 implications of. So I want you to do this, and this one you will turn in for next week. You'll do 5 of those, and you're building your annotated bibliography. It's also, if you are writing in the genre that requires a literary review or a literature review, you could write it directly from your annotated bibliography. You don't have to go back and look through notes and whatnot, because if you have the main arguments there, you're like, oh, this says this, this says this, this says this. And you can, write in one sentence, like William was showing us those different sentences that basically summarized a whole field of research. You can write them really quickly from an annotated bibliography.
Are you going to give us examples of annotated bibliography, just because I've never done one?
Yeah, I've done a reading for you.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And you know what? I think I might dig up the one I wrote for Islam in South Asia and give that one to you too. That's a good idea. I forgot.
And are we going to be expected to have an annotated bibliography for a thesis?
No.
Okay, this is just practice for this.
This is a practice. This is a research skill. So our next 2 sessions, and then we'll have another guest lecture, are going to be on. We're going to talk about annotated bibliographies next week, and we'll share ours a bit. Maybe we'll even have them put up in Google Drive, and we'll look at them together. I haven't decided exactly yet. Flying by the seat of my pants. And then we're going to talk about the occult and religious history of spontaneous writing. And Robert Boyce has a fantastic it has a chapter that I read it and I went, oh, that's really interesting. And I'll be bringing in some of my thoughts and some of my research on contemporary occultism and that. So that's going to be our next 2 classes. So I'll have the assignment and the reading up for you tonight. I have like 12 appointments coming up right away. All right. So it's been lovely. I'm glad you got to meet William. He's a lovely, nice man. I think you all have his email address because I sent you all the Zoom link for today, and it has his address on there. Use him as a resource. He's a good guy. He's always up for a chat. Every time I talk with him, we have a long conversation. I always find myself smarter. And you'll see that there's a link on Canvas to an essay he wrote about and in reaction to Douglas Brooks, and it has some of his thinking on yoga. And he wrote that in 2018, so that was right when he was taking his PhD exams. Okay, y'all. It's been real.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So you said Ben's gonna like sign off on the MA our theses. Are you gonna sign it off on it too, or
no? I mean, I'm gonna give you a grade in the class. The thing is, what would have made sense, and I would have suggested this, but it's up to everyone when they write a master's thesis, is you need to have your thesis chair, and then you usually have 2 other people. And I was going to suggest to y'all, if you wanted, I have a PhD, so I can serve on that. So because there's not a committee, you won't need to do that. However, we're going to be working on the master's thesis throughout this, and I assume when it comes time for you to really get ready to file this bad boy, I'll have seen drafts, and I'll probably I will be happy to do one final read through and give you my thoughts and editorial whatnot. But yeah, so I'll read it, but it won't be official in any way because that's the way Naropa is set up.
Oh, okay.
It's a little kooky. I'm trying to navigate it myself. Okay,
like
y'all.
What harm does it have to have you on a committee or something?
But there isn't a committee. That's the thing. There will only be. I've looked at the forms. It's one name.
Okay.
Ben will sign off on it. A departmental person will sign off it, and then like one other person, like in the graduate division, signs off on it. I'm like, huh? Never seen it that way. But hey, it's Naropa. They're doing it their own way. All right, I have to run to an appointment. I will see you next week at the same time. I hope this was really helpful to you. So I'm sure William will be sending me a bunch of stuff. I will put it all up on Canvas, and I will also make this video available to you on Canvas. I'm sorry I missed the first 10 minutes of it. It was all good, though. Okay, thanks a lot, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.